Hi, I'm Katie Sacra, and I will be serving as your host for today's training on why we use hand-under-hand facilitation, which is part two of a two-part GFPD training. I am grateful and delighted to be here again with Kate Beals. In case you missed her introduction on part one of the series, Kate Beals is a retired pediatric occupational therapist specializing in deafblindness with multiple complex disabilities. Kate's previous employment took her from South Carolina Interagency Deafblind Project to the Deafblind program at Perkins School for the Blind in Massachusetts. While at Perkins, Kate was sent to China to provide training for faculty at the Shanghai School for the Blind and the professors and students at East China Normal University. Kate presents both webinar and in-person trainings for multiple state deafblind projects, early intervention programs, and has served as a keynote speaker for the Low Incidence Disabilities Conference at the Region 10 Educational Service Center in Richardson, Texas. Her areas of special interest are sensory integration and the use of hand-under-hand facilitation to teach motor skills. Kate has a 34-year-old son who has autism, and he sings karaoke every Saturday night. Kate, thank you again for being with us today and sharing this training with our audience.
Thank you, Katie. It is really my pleasure to be here, and this is one of my most favorite topics, so I'm excited to get to share about it. All right, so as you heard, I am a retired occupational therapist, and more people understand what physical therapists do than occupational therapists, but occupational therapy addresses the things that we do every day. Just our daily living skills, our ability to bathe, dress, feed ourselves, interact with objects in meaningful ways. And so most of what we do addresses the use of the hands. However, it is a very, very holistic field, and we really work with the whole child. One of the most famous quotes in the field of occupational therapy is this one from Mary Riley. I believe that she said this in a presentation back in the 1960s. And it is really the foundation of the field of occupational therapy, that man, through the use of his hands, as they are energized by mind and will, can influence the state of his own health. So the use of our hands and meaningful occupation is both a goal of occupational therapy treatment and a method. It is both a goal and a method of treatment. Okay. So just a quick review about how children learn. Children do not learn by having their body. Oh, they learn. Are we on slide 2?
I'm sorry, I hit the button and towards you, but you're back to where you're supposed to be. Sorry about that.
Supposed to be. Okay, no worries. So children learn by having experiences, right? We all learn by having experiences. So when a baby is born, the baby's brain is much smoother than an adult's brain. If you've seen pictures of adult brains, they have lots and lots of wrinkles on them. But when babies are first born, they don't have so many wrinkles as what adults have. And it is experiences that causes these new wrinkles to form in the brain. So experience actually changes the structure of the brain as we learn. So repeating a motor activity, which we would call practice, causes pathways to form in the brain, and those pathways increase the accuracy and the efficiency of the action that we're performing. Like if you reach to pick up a can of soda, you become more and more accurate the more experience that you get. Okay. So children do not learn by having their body parts passively moved through an action. Passive movement is only used to stretch tight muscles and prevent contractures from forming in order to improve function. It is not an effective method of teaching a skill. A child must actively participate in order to learn. That's the only way you're going to get those new wrinkles on the brain. It is the active participation of the child that changes the brain. Okay. So I want to give credit to Millie Smith A lot of the content of this presentation is based on her work. If you want to go deeper into Millie Smith's work, she has an assessment tool called the Sensory Learning Kit, and it is incredible. And I had an opportunity to take some classes from Millie Smith when I was at Perkins, and they utterly changed my life and changed the way that I work with children. Even though I was an experienced OT, Millie's information totally changed the way that I worked with kids. Okay. So what we're going to do today, we're going to look at quick review, how sensory motor systems function. We'll talk about motor learning because, you know, whether we're parents or teachers or other therapists or other types of caregivers, we all want our kids to do something, right? We want them to do a thing that they presently cannot do. And so we need to talk a little about motor learning. This is a big name, event-related brain potential research. You don't have to know that name, but it is the thing that when you know it, changes everything. And that gives serious implications for the way we as adults use our hands in the way that we interact with and teach children. At the end, we'll look at some videos and resources. They are spectacular. I will not have time to go through all of them with you, but I really urge you to use those resources. There is so much more material available now than there was when I first started. And I urge you to follow those links because they are very, very helpful. Okay, we're going to go. We're going. So how do sensory motor systems function? So you got your body and you got a skeleton that's made up of bones. Bones are connected to each other by the tendons of muscles. Tendons cross over joints. So there's your elbow, and you don't want to see my flabby up your arms, but there's your elbow. And there are tendons that cross from the upper arm to the lower part of the arm. The muscle up here, its tendon crosses over the joint and attaches to the lower part of the arm. And the joints are where our body segments move. So we can bend and straighten our elbows and our knees and lots of other parts. So in order for a body segment to move at a joint, the muscle on one side of the bone has to get smaller. It has to contract and get smaller, while the muscle on the other side gets longer. Okay. So if we're going to bend the elbow, this muscle up here has to get smaller. It has to squish together, while this muscle underneath gets longer. So we're going to look at some more pictures of elbows. Okay. So here's a picture of an elbow. And so flexion is another word for bending. And the muscle on, Katie, can you do your cursor to show that where the biceps is on that bending elbow? My cursor isn't going to show. There you go. So in order to bend the elbow, the biceps muscle has to contract. It has to get smaller. And the triceps on the other side has to get longer. In order to straighten the elbow, to straighten our arm, it is the triceps muscle that gets smaller and the biceps muscle that gets longer. All right, so then that's extension. Straightening is called extension. Okay. So there's a skeleton, the pictures of the bones. And here's a little boy who's using elbow flexion to get a drink from his cup. Next, there we go. So how do the muscles know when to contract and when to elongate? Well, here's the news. The brain is the big boss of everything we do. The brain is the boss. And it is the brain that's going to tell those muscles what they should do. And it makes, well, okay, go ahead. I think it's on the next slide. Right. So in order to know about how brains tell the muscles what to do, you have to know a little bit about basic neurology. So you got your brain and you got your neurons. These neurons are special cells that communicate with the brain and take messages away from the brain. And there are both sensory and motor neurons. each of those kinds of neurons are unidirectional. They only travel one way, either towards the brain or away from the brain. And there's a space in between where those synapses, where they come together. And there's with enough stimulation, there's a chemical that crosses over between the neurons to carry the message to the next and the next and the next until it either gets to the brain or gets from the brain to the muscles. Sensory input from very specific receptors, which we talked about in the first webinar, sensory receptors go to the brain through the spinal cord. Motor output comes from the brain. They're motor instructions that leave the brain and tell the muscles what to do. And it is, by the way they are built in our bodies, it is structurally impossible for sensory information to go out away from the brain, and for motor information to go in towards the brain. So it's like a one-way street for each of them. Sensory goes in and motor goes out. Okay. So you don't have to know these names of processes, but I think it's useful for you to know that motor development proceeds from the top to the bottom. You're going to see a baby is going to lift his head in prone when he's on his tummy. He's going to lift his head before he's going to be able to stand up and walk with his feet. Okay, so it's from top to bottom, and also from the center of the body outwards. They call that proximal distal. Proximal is the center of the body. Distal is out by our hands and toes. Sometimes there can be abnormal muscle tone. If a child has cerebral palsy, for example, or other cerebral palsy will make the muscles too stiff. And so it's very hard to stretch them and elongate them. Or sometimes a child might be very floppy and have low muscle tone. The picture of the little boy trying to take his sock off, you see that he has to lean on his other hand, and he's leaning against the wall, and he's got his knee is bent so he can reach his sock. But it also gives him a bigger base of support. And he can't use two hands to get that sock off because he needs one to support the rest of his body. He has low tone through, this child had low tone everywhere, but especially through his trunk. And so he wasn't able to be stable in the middle to be able to use his hands and his feet, which are distal. Okay. So stability in the body precedes controlled movement. Remember, we are wanting the child to do something, right? But they can't do something with their hands unless they have stability through the center. So before we work with a child's hands, we've got to pay attention to what's going on with their trunk and what's happening with their pelvis, what's happening with their shoulders, and what's happening with the pelvis. And also a dear friend at Perkins, who's a PT, said this one time, and I have asked to borrow it. She said, the task that we want the child to perform has to be more motivating than the fear of trying it. So this little girl that she's working with has her little walker, but she was still afraid to in order to take a step, you have to stand on one foot. And she was really scared to lift up one foot to take that step. But my friend found that if she held the drum up, the little girl was really interested in that drum. And her motivation to pat the drum and make that sound was bigger than her fear of standing on one foot to take a step. Just something to keep in the back of your mind. Okay? Okay. So what is motor learning? I know we're going fast, but I'm going fast now because I really want to spend more time on something else that's coming up. So motor learning is the process by which motor skills are learned. And so think about, what is learning? What does learning mean? And where does it happen? Learning happens in the brain. Remember those wrinkles? Learning doesn't happen in the hands or the feet. Learning happens in the brain. And learning changes the brain. It makes lots of wrinkles. But in order to change the brain, active participation of the learner is absolutely essential. So you might hear about active and passive movement, and I want to go to a next slide to show you what that looks like. There is a place for passive stretch in our work with children. There is not a place for passively moving a child's hands and arms through a skill. They're totally different things. Passive stretch we use to prevent muscles from getting stuck and to prevent joints from getting stuck in a position so that the child cannot have functional use of those muscles. And so the picture on the left is, the left of your screen, is a physical therapist passively stretching a boy's elbow joint in order for him not to get contractures. And this boy typically, this was the position that he held his arms in most of the time, and he would pat the back of his head. And so he spent a lot of time in elbow flexion. If you spend too much time in elbow flexion, your muscles, your and tendons get stuck, and he's not able to extend that elbow. So she is simply passively, very gently moving him through a passive stretch. The other girl on the right side of the screen, you'll see her arms are also in flexion. And when I encountered this girl, she's a teenager. When I encountered her for the first time, her teacher said to me, "She does not do anything. I don't know why you're taking her for occupational therapy, because she doesn't do anything." Remember, we want our kids to do something. They said, "Oh no, she's not going to do anything. If you try to take her hands, she's going to pull them away. Because she is very stubborn," they told me. She's very stubborn and she doesn't like to do anything. And if you try to help her, she will pull her hands away. And probably there's something going on at home, certainly not in the classroom. There's probably something going on at home. And I'm like, yeah, for the last 15 years, you think maybe the thing going on at home has been for 15 years? And I was a little bit mortified about that. So, but you will see her again, and you will know what happened. But this girl, by using hand under hand, was able to achieve a whole bunch. Okay, next slide. So and this is the way that we all got taught many, many years ago. We got taught to use hand over hand. It's how we typically in the past have taught motor skills. And in hand, I got to use my green gloves. Anytime you see green, the green glove is going to be the adult's hand, and the ungloved hand will be the child's hand, okay? So in the past, we used to take the child's hand and move it, okay? We would move that hand, and we would force that hand to grab the can of Coke, right? We would squeeze those fingers, and then we would move the child's hand with the Coke in it that we're actually holding and set it down or put it in the recycle bin. But the adult's hand is on top. So if I'm as an adult, passively moving a child's hand through a skill, is the child learning anything? No, because whose brain is doing all the work? My brain, the grown-up's brain, is doing all the work, and the child is being passively moved. And so the child's brain isn't getting any input. Okay, next slide. So this thing happened, which is there was a neurology professor, I think in Germany, who did some research and discovered through his research that using brain imaging, that there are four stages to a motor event, okay? 4 stages to a motor action. And the 4 stages are preparation, initiation, execution, and termination. And Millie Smith talks about this in the Sensory Learning Kit guidebook and her assessment forms on pages 15 to 16, if you can ever get your hands on one. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is the thing that when you know it, changes everything about the way that you work with children. At the preparation stage of active movement, which is only merely the idea of moving and the intent to move, is the highest level of brain activity. Whoa, let that sink in. It is merely the idea of moving that is the point with the highest level of brain activity, as shown through brain imaging science. Now, we can't really see that idea of moving happen. But the next phase, initiation, is also has a very, very high level of cortical activity, cortical meaning in the brain. It is the very, very beginning of movement. And this is what Millie says. If a learner can intentionally tense a muscle, blink an eye, open or close a mouth or hand, lean the head forward or backward, or extend an arm or leg just the tiniest bit, then that learner can initiate movement. And you can see and you can feel that if you are paying attention. When those of us who are in positions where we have to write goals for students or goals in therapy, our goals have to be based on observation, right? Well, how we assess goals has to be based on observation. And this is something that you can observe, and therefore it is appropriate material for goal writing. In the long version of this presentation, there's a whole section about goal writing. We're not going to do that today. But at the initiation phase, which is just the very, very beginning of movement, you can see or feel it if you're paying attention. Okay, next slide. Execution of the movement is the actual performance of the intended action, carrying out the activity. You can see the pictures of these children doing something, right? Opening the egg to dump out the rice, putting the ring on the ring stander. But here's the big surprise. Brain activity drops significantly during this phase. This blew my mind. It absolutely blew my mind when I heard Millie talk about it. Brain activity drops at the execution phase of the movement. It is high with the idea of moving and the very, very beginning of moving, but it drops off lower, much lower with execution. Okay, next slide. And termination of the activity is simply processing feedback at the end of the action. And brain activity is really very quiet at this point. It's very quiet. So there is much less of our neurons communicating with each other at the point of terminating the activity. So that is why hand over hand doesn't work. The learner's highest level of brain activity occurs at preparation and initiation. And when the adult's hand is on top, get my glove back on, when the adult's hand is on top, moving the child's hand, it's the adult's brain that's doing the work. And because learning takes place in the brain and we want the child to learn, if the learner's brain isn't doing the work, then they can't learn. I was stunned. I was stunned when I learned this. Okay, next slide. So here is why hand, now the previous slide was about hand over hand, was hand over hand. Now we're going to talk about why hand under hand does work. And I got a question on this once, and I want to point out that now my adult's hand is going to be underneath. It's still touching the child. When I say hand under hand, I don't mean it's, a couple inches under the hand. It's touching the hand, but it is underneath and not covering the whole surface of the child's palm. So the reason hand under hand does work is that with the learners with the highest level of brain activity being preparation and initiation and learning happening in the brain, when the adult's hand is underneath, you can feel when that learner begins to move. You can feel the initiation. You can feel it, and you can go along with it. You can guide it a tiny bit, but you're not doing this. So when it is the learner, not the adult, who prepares and initiates, then it's the learner's brain that's doing the work. And because the learner's brain is doing the work, they can actually learn and make wrinkles on their brain and make functional pathways. Okay. So after this is the same young man that you saw who was being passively stretched. That wasn't to teach a skill, right? But when I had him for OT, we used hand under hand for him to learn skills. And this is all he did at that time. At that time, this was all he did. And he wouldn't touch anything. He was not interested in objects. So what I attempted to do based on the information I learned from Millie was first establish a relationship. And that is absolutely the first thing that anybody has to do when working with a child. You have to establish a relationship based on mutual respect and trust. And then using hand under hand, he learned, and you have to work, like I can't ask him to leap the Grand Canyon, all right? I want him to go to the very next step of his motor development. I don't want him to go too far. I want him to achieve a thing that he actually can do. So we're working in the zone of proximal development. Look at how happy he is. He learned to reach for a cause and effect toy, to apply the correct amount of pressure to activate the music and the glitter that would fly around inside this dome. And he learned to do that independently. He was really proud of himself and felt competent. Now, remember the teenager who was like this, and the teacher said, "Oh, she doesn't do anything. She'll pull her hands away when you try to work with her." I'll tell you what, using hand under hand, she learned to make choices about activities, to pick up, orient, and put coins in a slot, and she loved doing it. She learned to pick up, orient, and place craft sticks in a plastic bottle, which became for her in her pre-vocational assignment, picking up, orienting, and putting flower stems into a vase. It's pretty cool. She learned how to stack blocks. She learned how to string beads. And this is my most favorite thing that she learned. She learned to use a reacher to pick toys up off the floor. So there is function. She learned function by hand under hand. And that we have a little video that shows you her working with coins. Actually, you can see my hand in there. See where my hand is? Hers is on top. Oh, this time I didn't hand it to her. This time she picked it up herself. So the young lady that I was told doesn't do anything, by the use of hand under hand facilitation, she learned how to do a lot. So what does it mean for how we use our hands as adults when we're trying to teach a motor skill to children? We have to make our hands and our whole presence be inviting, not demanding. We use minimal force. We slow the heck down. And there's going to be a video that shows that too. We have to teach our hands to listen so that when that child barely initiates movement, we can feel it. We are sensitive to that. Okay, next slide. So how does this all work? So the adult's hand is underneath the child's, inviting the child to explore together. Let's explore together, not I'm going to make you do this action. The child might pull away, and that is okay, because you may still be working on mutual respect and trust. When the child has trust in you, then the child is going to be willing to have your fingertips underneath their fingertips. And so then how do you build that foundation of mutual respect and trust? The first thing is to be consistent in the way you work with the child. You pay attention to greeting and leave taking. You have to be real gentle and use lots and lots of wait time. You have to give the child a chance to respond. It takes time for a child who has significant disabilities to process information from the brain out to the muscles. It just takes them more time. And rather than jumping in and taking over the activity, we have to be patient and wait for the child to move. We've got to pay attention to their nonverbal communication signals, because that's really an important way of earning trust. And I said this once in a presentation, and the coordinator asked me to please say it every time. You have to, especially if the child is difficult in various ways, you have to, when you look at that child, you look at them as if they are the most magnificent being on the face of the earth, and that there is absolutely no place else you would rather be than working with them. And the more the child drools, the more the child is likely to spit up on you. The more the child looks different from typically developing kids, the more you have to do this. And it works. It is not scientific, but it changes the energy of the interaction. So that's a little non-scientific tip. So this is a video about developing a relationship based on mutual respect and trust. This little girl has charge syndrome, and this is a woman, a teacher from Moldova, who is part of the international learning program at Perkins. And I don't know if I don't get sound. Katie, do you get sound?
I do have sound, or you don't have any
You have
sound?
I don't have sound, but let me see. Okay. Hopefully our viewers have sound.
Okay. If not, they will have to be able to go back and watch as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, it's okay. It is the physical interaction that matters in this.
Agree.
See how suspicious the girl looks? She's like, yeah, you're doing that thing, but I'm not. Oh, well, maybe it's fun. Do you see the little girl's hands starting to lift? Like she's looking for more? Oh, Nellie tries to go under. Gracie isn't having it. Oh, look, now it's a conversation. This was completely spontaneous. It was complete. I went to get a toy, and Nellie started this with Grace, and I just went, never mind the toy, I'm getting my camera. Watch. You see her starting to grin? All right, now on the next slide, we'll see part 2. I think that the video was a little bit slow, and so what you didn't see was when Nellie put her hand, when she put her hand in between the child's, Grace went and flicked it away. All right,
And
here's how the
Kate, I love that you use the word, oh, look, a conversation is happening now.
yeah,
I just
it's a
wanted to share
conversation.
briefly that, yeah, I think that sometimes my own team years ago, my son's educational team, I didn't realize that when they didn't have a lot of the training in deafblindness, they didn't realize that when I was saying, we need to be having conversations, I think they looked
Right,
at me like I was crazy. But that was absolutely a conversation taking place. There was reciprocal
yeah.
interactions, and I just love
Mhm.
that you use that and wanted to point that out because I think that sometimes people think if they're not verbally or even signing in a way that is a
Right,
typical communication method that most people see, they don't realize that this is still a conversation taking
that
place.
is, it absolutely is. And wait till you see how it ends. She got a more. See how Nellie waited for Grace to indicate she wanted to continue. Oh, a new conversation. They take turns leading. See how she's looking at Grace like she wouldn't want to be anywhere else?
This is such a great example.
It was, I thought it was miraculous.
It is.
So Grace changes it up. She smacks that table. The adult is following the child. They're best buds now.
Mhm.
She has to stop to pull her eyelashes just for a sec. Yes, so cued more. Waiting patiently. Here are my hands. Yes. Yes. It is my most favorite thing to watch. It is my very most favorite thing to watch. So um, I know that is not a visual of a how to do hand under hand. I realize that, but it is the building the foundation of mutual respect and trust that has to come first. So the next video is something that happened in my very own house a couple of nights ago. And this little boy has a complex chromosome deletion syndrome, and his habitual motor plan, if he has an object, his habitual motor plan is to fling it. He just flings it. It just goes. It just grows, and gravity takes it. It might knock you on the head first, but when he has an object in his hand, he flings it. We've been working for about 3 weeks on releasing to a target, and he's making excellent progress with that. And this I had he and his family were visiting my house as well as some other relatives who had not even met him before, and he was all into one of these other relatives and generalized the skill. He's just beginning to put an object into my hand and into his mom's hand, and he generalized the skill to put in the hand of a different relative whom he had never met. So here we go with it. See how the adult hands just wait. The child begins to offer, but the adult just waits. He doesn't reach and take the carrot. It's a plastic carrot. It was Easter. He doesn't take the carrot from the child. He waits for the child to release. There we go. And the crowd went wild. Everybody in the room was screaming. It was very, very fun. So we have to remember that thing that I started with at the very, very beginning about the hands being energized by mind and will, right? That's where the preparation and initiation comes in. That action is energized by the child's mind and the child's will, and he is making wrinkles on his brain. So I just want to point out wait time. Very, very important.
I love that you're pointing out wait time. I think that that's something for us parents even is it's really challenging. You don't realize how hard it is. And I used to have to count in my head when I first learned about wait time many years ago. I literally counted in my head because I didn't realize how quick I was to do things for my son or how quick I was to prompt him even. And I was making him prompt dependent because I was prompting too quickly. I wasn't giving him time.
Right. Right. And yeah, so I was sitting next to this is my soon to be brother-in-law, Wayne. I was sitting next to him and he started to take the because he could interpret that the child wanted to give him the carrot, so he was going to take it. And I'm elbowing him. No, just wait. And then sure enough, Riley released. So yeah, so wait time is really, really important. And I have permission to show the video and the stills.
Yeah, and just a tip even that I would love to share that I learned and have shared with other professionals that worked with my own son is to record yourself when you're working with an individual. You know, recording yourself. Sometimes you think you gave enough wait time and you didn't. You may look at the video and realize that there was a shift or a move that you missed. And so really even recording yourself when you're doing this is a great tool.
Yeah, when you say there's a shift or a move that you missed, that is like really watching and being sensitive. I'm so glad you said that. Really being sensitive to the tensing of a muscle or a very slight movement. And we have to train ourselves to do that and to not rush, because I mean it's easy for us to interpret if it looks like the child is going to hand you a thing. It's easy for us to interpret that and hurry it along by reaching out to take the thing. But it's really important to let the child complete the action.
Thank you. I love that. That's just, I know it seems like such a simple slide, but it's so important.
It is. So, oh my gosh, we're actually getting close to finishing on time, which is yet another miracle. So I just want to summarize the concepts that we've talked about today. And I go back to this in my own mind all the time, that man, the quote, man through the use of his hands, as they are energized by mind and will, can influence the state of his own health. The name of the kind of research is event-related brain potential research. You don't have to know that name, but just know that it demonstrates that the highest level of brain activity, actual science demonstrates that the highest level of brain activity will occur at the preparation and initiation phases of intentional movement. That's why we as adults have to slow down and pay attention. And to bring that full circle, hand underhand, not hand overhand, but hand underhand facilitation allows for the child's hands to be energized by mind and will. Next. We are not going to show this little video today. I had an opportunity during some computer training to make a video about hand under hand. We're not going to show it today, but if you have time to go back to it and watch it, I made it, so I think it's cute. But it's just sort of a little summary of the child's point of view of adults using hand over hand versus hand under hand. Now, resources. all of these resources are fantastic. They will take you to articles. They will take you to more videos. Um, the nationaldb.org has tremendous training materials that I am positive you would find super interesting. Any of you who are college students, this is a marvelous place for you to find information for projects that you might be working on. Um, um, and there's yet another page too, but I really urge you, as you have time, to go back and explore some of these. I think you'll be super surprised at how much information is available now that was not available in the past. PerkinsElearning.org is fantastic. They have wonderful, wonderful courses. Go to activelearningspace.org. Active Learning Space is all about children planning and initiating movement on their own. It is an entire method of working with kids who are deafblind. It is based on the work of Lily Nielsen. Paths to Literacy is amazing. It can take that conversation that we saw with Nellie and Grace. It can take that and turn that into reading. Okay, I don't mean reading words, perhaps eventually, but it can take that kind of interaction and make it literacy. So definitely go there. So we talked about how sensory motor systems function. We talked about motor learning. We all want our kids to do something. We talked about event-related brain potential research. But most importantly, the implications of those things for how we use our hands to teach motor skills to children. And we brought up some videos and resources for you. So that is the last slide, other than my thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for participating. And if you have any questions, you are welcome to email me at my email address, which is clanmcjammies@gmail.com. And Katie, thank you so much for making this possible.
Oh, no, thank you, Kate. Thank you for being here, your commitment to training and teaching others to help all of our children. We just appreciate you so much, Kate, really. And
my pleasure.
I look forward to being able to have some conversations with you and others who will be watching these training videos. I know that we're going to expand so much. As you were talking, it just brought back so many memories for me, even of different interactions with my own son. So I'm really eager to be able to, expand and continue this. It's such an important conversation, and it just helps so many. So thank you.
Thank you. I look forward to that.